My name is Samuel, and if you'd asked me a year ago whether I believed people could walk back into your life after a decade and change everything, I would have laughed. Not because I didn't believe in second chances, because I didn't believe in coincidences. I had spent the last 4 years working my way up in a mid-sized marketing agency in Chicago. Long hours, too much coffee, enough late nights at the office that the cleaning staff knew my name better than some of my coworkers. At 28, I wasn't where I'd dreamed I'd be, but I was finally respected. My team trusted me, my clients liked me, and I was next in line for a promotion. At least, that's what everyone kept telling me. Then our department director resigned. The company decided to hire someone from outside instead of promoting internally. You could practically feel the disappointment spreading across the office, especially mine. Maybe it'll still work out, my coworker Emily said while we waited for the Monday morning meeting. Maybe the new manager will recognize your experience. I forced a smile. Sure. I didn't believe it. Outside hires usually arrived with their own ideas, their own people, and their own egos. I expected someone in their 40s. Someone who'd treat us like we were incompetent until proven otherwise. Someone I'd spend months trying to impress. At exactly 9 o'clock, our HR director walked into the conference room. Everyone, she said with that painfully enthusiastic corporate smile, I'd like you to meet your new department manager. The door opened, and the world stopped. James. For a second, I genuinely forgot how to breathe. He looked older, obviously, taller than I remembered. His dark hair was shorter now, neatly styled, and there was a confidence in the way he walked that hadn't existed when we were kids. But it was him. There wasn't a doubt in my mind. James Carter, the boy I'd spent every summer with until we were 14. The boy who disappeared without saying goodbye. He looked around the room professionally before his eyes landed on me. There was the smallest pause, barely noticeable. Then recognition flashed across his face. Samuel? It wasn't loud. He almost whispered it. I saw surprise replace the calm expression he'd walked in with. Real surprise. The HR director looked confused. You two know each other? James blinked once before recovering. We grew up together. That was all he said. Grew up together. As if those words explained anything. As if 10 years of memories could fit inside one sentence. Everyone turned to look at me. I managed an awkward nod. Yeah. The meeting continued, but I barely heard any of it. My mind had already gone somewhere else. Back to a tiny neighborhood where every kid knew everyone else's name. Back to scraped knees, tree houses, bicycles, and endless July afternoons. Back to James. We met when I was 8. My parents had just moved into a quiet suburban neighborhood, and I didn't know anyone. On our second day there, I was trying to shoot a basketball into the old hoop in our driveway. I missed every single shot. Eventually, the ball rolled into the street. Someone caught it before I could. I looked up. A skinny blonde-haired kid about my age stood there holding my basketball under one arm. You throw weird, he announced. I frowned. I do not. You do. I've only been playing for 5 minutes. He shrugged. You still throw weird. I expected him to laugh. Instead, he walked over, handed me the ball, and said, I'm James. Samuel. Want to learn how to shoot? That was it. No dramatic beginning. No instant friendship. Just basketball. Within a week, we were inseparable. Our parents joked that feeding one of us meant feeding both of us because we were constantly at each other's houses. My mom loved James. His mom adored me. Summer vacations became one endless adventure. Building forts in the woods. Trying to catch fish even though neither of us knew how. Camping in my backyard because we thought sleeping outside made us adults. Playing video games until someone's dad reminded us the sun had already come up. James was fearless. He climbed the tallest trees. Jumped from impossible heights. Started conversations with strangers. I was the opposite. Careful. Quiet. Always thinking before acting. For some reason, it worked. He dragged me into adventures. I kept him out of trouble. Usually, when we were 13, we decided to build a treehouse behind the abandoned lot near our street. It was objectively terrible. Crooked boards. Rusty nails. Half the roof leaked. We thought it was magnificent. This is going to be our headquarters, James declared proudly. For what? He thought about it. Life. I laughed. That's not a thing. It is now. He reached into his backpack and pulled out 2 cheap friendship bracelets his older sister had helped him make. One blue, one green. I figured headquarters need official members. I stared at them. You made these. My sister helped. So she made them. I supervised. I couldn't stop smiling. We tied the bracelets onto each other's wrists. No taking them off, James said. Ever. Ever. I actually believed we'd keep that promise forever. Funny how kids think forever is simple. Everything changed when we were 16. Or maybe 15. It's hard to remember exactly when childhood starts slipping away. James got into sports. Football. Track. His weekends filled with tournaments and new friends. I got obsessed with computers and design. Different schools. Different schedules. We still hung out. Just less. One evening I biked to his house like always. His mom answered the door. Oh, sweetheart. Something about her expression immediately felt wrong. They left this morning. I blinked. What? James's father got transferred. I stared at her. Transferred where? Seattle. No. I'm sorry. When are they coming back? She looked down. They aren't. I laughed because surely this was some misunderstanding. He would have told me. Her silence answered before she did. They had to leave quickly. He would have called. He wanted to. He didn't. She nodded sadly. No. I rode my bike home without remembering the trip. The next day, I went back to the treehouse. One bracelet still hung from a nail where James had taken it off while fixing part of the roof weeks earlier. He'd forgotten it. Or maybe he'd planned to come back. I never found out. He never called. Neither did I. Eventually, life moved on. College. Work. New cities. New people. The treehouse was probably torn down years ago. Sometimes I'd randomly think about him. Wonder where he'd ended up. Then I'd get busy again. That's how childhood friends disappear. Quietly. Without closure. Samuel? I looked up. James was standing beside my desk. The office had emptied after the meeting. I hadn't even noticed. You okay? His voice sounded almost exactly the same. Older. Lower. But unmistakably his. I stood up awkwardly. I didn't expect. Neither did I. We stared at each other. Both smiling a little. Both clearly unsure what came next. You disappeared. The words came out before I could stop them. His smile faded. I know. You never called. I know. I thought. I know. There was something in his eyes I couldn't read. Regret. Maybe guilt. Maybe both. I owe you an explanation, he said quietly. You probably do. He nodded once. I'd like to give you one. I folded my arms. When? He hesitated. After work. For a moment, 16-year-old me wanted to say yes immediately. 28-year-old me remembered something else. He wasn't just James anymore. He was my new manager. I don't think that's a good idea. His expression shifted. Professional again. Right. The distance returned instantly. I understand. He stepped back. I'll see you tomorrow morning, Samuel. He said my name differently than everyone else did. Like he'd known it forever. Because he had. I watched him walk toward his new office. Somehow, after 10 years apart, my childhood best friend had become my boss. And I had absolutely no idea whether that was the best thing that had ever happened to me. Or the worst. The next morning, I arrived at the office 20 minutes earlier than usual. Not because I had work to finish. Because I didn't know how I was supposed to act. Should I pretend yesterday hadn't happened? Should I congratulate James on the promotion like everyone else? Should I ask why he vanished from my life? By the time I reached my desk, I'd rehearsed at least 15 different conversations. None of them survived longer than 30 seconds in my head. Emily leaned over the divider. You look exhausted. I didn't sleep much. She lowered her voice. So, your new boss. I already knew where this conversation was going. You really grew up together? Yeah. Like neighbors. Best friends. Her eyebrows shot up. Seriously? I nodded. For years. That's actually kind of adorable. It was. She looked toward James's glass office. So why haven't you talked in forever? I stared at my coffee. I honestly don't know. That wasn't entirely true. I knew what happened. He moved away. What I didn't know was why he disappeared afterward. There had been birthdays, Christmases, graduations, hundreds of opportunities to pick up the phone. Neither of us ever did. Mostly him. At exactly 9, James called for our first department meeting. The atmosphere felt different this time. Yesterday, everyone had been evaluating the new manager. Today, they were waiting to see what kind of leader he actually was. James stood in front of the conference room with a tablet in one hand. Gone was the surprised expression from yesterday. Now he looked composed. Professional. I know management changes can be uncomfortable, he began. So I'd rather be straightforward. His voice carried naturally across the room. I don't believe in changing successful systems just to prove I'm in charge. Several people visibly relaxed. I'll spend the next few weeks learning how everyone works before making major decisions. Good. Smart. Exactly what I would have wanted from a manager. He continued outlining goals for upcoming projects. Deadlines. Client expectations. Team restructuring. He knew his job better than I'd expected. Then his eyes landed on me. Samuel. Every head turned. I reviewed your campaign for the Anderson account last night. My stomach tightened. Excellent work. A few coworkers looked surprised. I'd like you to lead the presentation next Thursday. I blinked. Me? Unless you're uncomfortable with that. No. I cleared my throat. I'm not. Good. Then he moved on like nothing unusual had happened. The meeting ended 10 minutes later. As people filtered out, Emily nudged me. I told you. Told me what? He likes your work. He's my manager. So that doesn't mean anything. She smiled knowingly. It means he trusts you. If only she knew. Working under James turned out to be strange. Not because he treated me differently, because he went out of his way not to. If anything, he was more formal with me than everyone else. Good morning, Samuel. Please send that report by 4. Thank you for staying late. Never Sam. Never Sammy. Never the nickname he'd used practically every day of our childhood. It almost bothered me. Almost. At least until Thursday. The Anderson presentation went well. Better than well. The client signed an expanded contract worth more than anyone expected. As soon as they left, applause broke out around the conference room. Emily grinned. You crushed it. I got lucky. You were prepared. James gathered his notes before looking at me. My office. The room immediately went quiet. Every employee knew what that meant. Private meeting. I followed him down the hallway, already wondering if I'd made some mistake despite the successful presentation. He closed the office door. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he leaned against his desk. You've gotten really good. I laughed softly. That's why you called me in here. Partly. His office suddenly felt much smaller than it had 5 minutes ago. I meant what I said, he continued. Your work is excellent. Thank you. Silence settled again. Then he sighed. I've wanted to explain since Monday. I crossed my arms. You've had 10 years. His expression tightened. I deserve that. Probably. He nodded slowly. When my dad got transferred. I know he got transferred. What you don't know is that we found out 2 days before leaving. I frowned. 2 days. He accepted the position without telling anyone. I hadn't expected that. My mom wanted to organize goodbye dinners. My dad said there wasn't time. James looked down at the floor. I packed my room overnight. What about calling me? I tried. I stared at him. What? The day after we arrived in Seattle. He met my eyes. Your number didn't work. I frowned harder. It was the same number. My mom said it had been disconnected. It wasn't. Confusion spread across both our faces. I wrote letters. You what? 3. I never got any. I thought you ignored them. I thought you forgot me. Neither of us spoke. 10 years. 10 years built on assumptions. James sat down slowly. My dad wasn't exactly supportive of attachments. I waited. He thought looking back would make moving harder. So he threw them away. I stared at him. The letters. My friendship bracelet. The photos. He swallowed. I found out years later. Something heavy settled inside my chest. All those years. All that anger. Built on something neither of us had actually chosen. I should have looked harder, James said quietly. When I turned 18. When I got my own phone. When social media became normal. I should have found you. I looked out the office window. So should I. He smiled sadly. I searched once. I turned back. When? About 3 years ago. And there were about 400 Samuel Bennetts. I laughed despite myself. Fair point. I gave up too easily. So did I. Silence returned. Different this time. Lighter somehow. I missed you. The words escaped before I could stop them. James looked at me. I know. No. I shook my head. I mean, I really missed you. His voice dropped almost to a whisper. I missed you too. There it was. The conversation I'd imagined for 10 years. Nothing dramatic. No shouting. Just 2 adults realizing they'd both been carrying the same misunderstanding. A knock interrupted us. James immediately straightened. Come in. Emily stepped inside holding a folder. Oh. Her eyes bounced between us. Sorry. No problem, James said smoothly. What do you need? She explained a scheduling issue while I quietly slipped toward the door. As I reached it, James spoke without looking at me. Excellent presentation today, Samuel. Professional again. Like the conversation had never happened. Thank you. I left. That evening I couldn't stop thinking. Not about work. About James. About letters that never arrived. About a friendship bracelet thrown away by someone else's decision. About how close we'd come to reconnecting years earlier. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. For a second I almost ignored it. Instead I answered. Hello. Samuel? I smiled despite myself. You found my number a little faster this time. James laughed. I asked HR. I figured. I hope that's not inappropriate. It probably is. Probably. Silence. Comfortable silence. So, I still owe you dinner. I frowned. Dinner? For Monday. Oh, technically he was right. You still said no. I did. And I looked out my apartment window. This is still probably a bad idea. Because I'm your manager? Exactly. I know. Another pause. So let's not call it dinner. What should we call it? He thought for a second. Two old friends catching up. I couldn't help smiling. You always were terrible at naming things. You remember headquarters? I laughed. The treehouse. Headquarters for life. That was your idea. It was an excellent idea. It was objectively awful. It had character. It leaked. It was symbolic. I laughed harder than I had in weeks. The sound surprised both of us. I missed that, James admitted. What? Making you laugh. Something warm settled quietly inside my chest. Not romance. Not yet. Just familiarity. Like finding an old photograph you thought had been lost forever. So, he asked gently. Coffee. I hesitated. Every logical part of my brain screamed that this crossed professional boundaries. Every emotional part remembered a blue friendship bracelet. One coffee. I'll take it. And outside office hours. Obviously. And if this gets weird, it won't. You don't know that. He laughed. Fair. When? Saturday. I looked at my calendar even though I already knew it was empty. Saturday. After hanging up, I realized something. For the first time in 10 years. James wasn't just a memory anymore. He was back in my life. I just had no idea what that would mean for either of us. Saturday arrived much faster than I expected. I spent an embarrassing amount of time deciding what to wear. Not because it was a date. It absolutely wasn't. It was coffee. Two childhood friends catching up. That was all. Still, after changing shirts 3 times, I finally settled on a simple navy sweater and jeans. I reached the cafe 10 minutes early. Old habit. James was already there. Of course he was. He sat near the window with a mug in front of him, reading something on his tablet. When he noticed me walking in, he immediately smiled. Not the polite smile he wore at the office. The real one. The one I remembered from childhood. You still arrive early. So do you. I got here 20 minutes ago. I laughed. Show off. He stood as I reached the table. For one awkward second, neither of us knew whether to shake hands or hug. We settled for a brief hug that somehow felt both completely natural and strangely unfamiliar. So, James said as we sat down. So, I forgot how difficult small talk is with someone who already knows your entire childhood. You used to eat glue. His eyes widened. I did that once. It was still glue. I was curious. You were an idiot. I was an adventurous scientist. I laughed. No, you absolutely were not. The conversation became easier after that. Much easier. We talked about college. Different cities. Jobs. Terrible apartments. Bad bosses. Emily had been right. James listened differently than most people. He actually paid attention. When I mentioned a difficult client from 2 years earlier, he remembered something I'd said 20 minutes before and connected it naturally. He'd always done that. It made conversations feel important. So, I finally asked, Seattle? He leaned back in his chair. It was rough at first. I can imagine. I hated it. You had friends? Eventually. But nobody was. He searched for the right word. You? I smiled slightly. I had the same problem. We both looked out the cafe window for a moment. You know, James said quietly, I went back once. I turned toward him. Back where? Our neighborhood. When? 3 years ago. You never told me. I couldn't. He looked almost embarrassed. The tree house was gone. I smiled sadly. I'm not surprised. The tree was still there. I hadn't expected that. I sat there for almost an hour. Doing what? Thinking. He laughed softly. I even looked around hoping you'd randomly walk by. What are the chances? Very low. But I hoped anyway. Something tightened inside my chest. Not painfully. just enough to remind me how much time we'd lost. 3 hours passed without either of us noticing. When the waiter brought the bill, James reached for it first. No. I grabbed it before he could. I'm paying. You invited me. So, I'm older. By 4 months. It still counts. It absolutely doesn't. We ended up splitting it. Exactly like we used to argue over arcade tokens when we were kids. Outside, the afternoon sun had started sinking behind the buildings. I should go, I said. Yeah. Neither of us moved. I had fun. James smiled. So did I. There was another pause. The office is going to be weird on Monday. A little. We probably shouldn't tell everyone we spent 3 hours talking. I wasn't planning to. He nodded. Good. As we started walking toward the parking lot, James suddenly stopped. Samuel. Yeah. I'm really glad I found you. The sincerity in his voice caught me completely off guard. I didn't realize how much I needed. He stopped himself. What? He smiled. A friend. I looked at him for a long second. Me too. Monday morning was exactly as awkward as we'd predicted. James became manager James II. He walked through the office doors. Professional. Focused. Calm. If anyone had seen us laughing over coffee 2 days earlier, they would have assumed they were looking at different people. During the morning meeting, he assigned new projects. Emily, you'll handle the Benson account. She nodded. Ryan, I need the quarterly numbers by Wednesday. Got it. Then he looked at me. Samuel. Yes. I'd like you to oversee the Parker campaign. I frowned. Just me. The client specifically requested continuity after last week's presentation. That made sense. At least it sounded like it did. The meeting ended. 5 minutes later, Ryan appeared beside my desk. Lucky. What? The boss clearly likes you. I looked up from my laptop. He likes everyone's work. Ryan snorted. Come on. I've never seen a manager hand someone that much responsibility on week 2. It wasn't his decision. Sure. He walked away before I could answer. Emily quietly slid into the chair beside my desk. Ignore him. I am. She hesitated. Can I ask something? I already knew what it would be. About James. She nodded. Were you really close? Very. Like brothers. The question lingered longer than expected. I don't know. Maybe. She smiled. I can kind of see it. See what? The way you two talk. We barely talk at work. Exactly. I frowned. That doesn't make sense. It does. She lowered her voice. You don't try to impress him. You talk to him like he's just James. Because he was. At least to me. Over the next few weeks, an unusual routine developed. Inside the office, everything stayed strictly professional. Outside the office, we slowly started rebuilding 10 years of friendship. Coffee became dinners. Dinners became weekend walks. Sometimes we'd spend hours simply talking. Other times we'd sit in comfortable silence. Nothing felt forced. One Friday evening, we ended up walking along the river after dinner. The city lights reflected across the water. I forgot how easy this is, James admitted. What is? Talking to you. I smiled. You always talked enough for both of us. I definitely did. He laughed. I remember your mom telling me to let you finish your own sentences. She had a point. I was enthusiastic. You interrupted everyone. I still do. You absolutely still do. He nudged my shoulder lightly. I missed you, you know. I looked ahead instead of at him. You've said that. I don't think you realize how much. There was something different in his voice. Quieter. More vulnerable. When I moved, he continued, I kept expecting to wake up and realize it was temporary. I thought you'd be back by school. I thought so too. We stopped near the railing overlooking the river. I kept one thing. I frowned. What? He reached into his jacket pocket. For a second I thought he was looking for his phone. Instead, he held out something faded. Blue. A friendship bracelet. I stared at it. No way. I found it years later. The other one. My dad missed one. I couldn't speak. It doesn't fit anymore. He laughed quietly. But I never threw it away. I looked down at my own wrist instinctively. Of course it wasn't there. I'd lost mine sometime during high school. I wish I'd kept mine. You kept the memories. So did you. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then James carefully put the bracelet back into his pocket. My sister would be furious if she knew I still had this. Why? She said I'd become sentimental. You did. I absolutely did. You cried during that dog movie. That dog died. It was still a cartoon. It was emotional. I laughed. You haven't changed. I have. His smile softened. But not around you. That sentence stayed with me all weekend. Monday morning brought an unexpected problem. The CEO announced a company retreat. 3 days. A lakeside conference center. Mandatory attendance for management and senior staff. James read the email twice before looking toward my desk. I already knew what he was thinking. 3 days working together outside the office, with everyone watching. This was either going to strengthen our friendship or make things far more complicated than either of us was prepared for. The company retreat started on a Thursday morning. 3 buses waited outside the office building, and judging by everyone's mood, nobody was thrilled about leaving behind comfortable desks for 3 days of team building. Ryan complained before we'd even boarded. If they make us do trust falls, I'm quitting. Emily laughed. You say that every year. One of these years I'll mean it. I grabbed my backpack and headed toward the second bus. James was already outside talking with the operations director. The moment he noticed me, our eyes met for barely a second. Then he looked away. Professional. Exactly as we'd agreed. Still, after weeks of rebuilding our friendship outside the office, pretending we were only manager and employee suddenly felt harder than expected. The conference center sat beside a large lake about 2 hours outside the city. The place was beautiful. Tall pine trees surrounded the property. Wooden cabins overlooked the water. The air smelled completely different from downtown Chicago. Fresh, quiet, peaceful. Emily stretched dramatically as we got off the bus. I needed this. Ryan looked toward the cabins. I need Wi-Fi. You have a problem. I have standards. James gathered everyone near the entrance. Rooms have already been assigned. He began reading names from a clipboard. Emily and Sarah. Ryan and Michael. He continued until only 2 names remained. Samuel. I looked up. Cabin 12. He glanced down once more. James. The entire group went silent. Even James blinked. The HR director immediately frowned. Oh, she looked at another list. That's... Her face turned red. I'm so sorry. Apparently someone in administration had assigned rooms alphabetically, without realizing that managers weren't supposed to share cabins with employees. I'll fix it, she said quickly. We have 1 empty cabin. James shook his head. Actually, everyone looked at him. It's fine. The HR director hesitated. Are you sure? We already know each other. A few people laughed. Emily smiled knowingly. I don't mind if Samuel doesn't. Every pair of eyes turned toward me. I forced myself to stay calm. It's okay. The HR director still looked uncomfortable. If either of you changes your mind, we'll let you know, James said. Problem solved. At least officially. Cabin 12 was much nicer than either of us expected. 2 separate bedrooms. A shared living room. Small kitchen. A porch overlooking the lake. James set his suitcase near one bedroom. I'll take this one. Works for me. For a minute, we simply unpacked in silence. Finally, James laughed. This is ridiculous. What is? We spent 10 years apart. Yeah. Now we're sharing a cabin because someone sorted names alphabetically. I smiled. It does sound like something that would have happened to us as kids. It really does. He leaned against the kitchen counter. Just so we're clear. Yeah. At work this weekend. I know. Manager. And employee. He nodded. Outside the cabin. I looked at him. What about inside? A smile slowly appeared. Friends. The first afternoon was filled with presentations. Budget forecasts. Department goals. Corporate strategy. Exactly as exciting as expected. By dinner, everyone looked exhausted. The large dining hall buzzed with conversation. James sat with the other department managers. I joined Emily and Ryan. So, Ryan said while stabbing his salad dramatically. How's living with the boss? It's a cabin. It's still weird. Not really. Emily smiled over her drink. I think it's sweet. Ryan looked confused. Why? They grew up together. Oh, he thought about it. Actually, yeah. He looked toward James across the room. You know, he smiles differently around you. I nearly dropped my fork. What? He doesn't do that manager face. I don't know what you're talking about. Emily laughed. I noticed too. Great. Apparently, we weren't nearly as subtle as we'd believed. That evening, everyone gathered around a large bonfire near the lake. Someone brought guitars. Someone else started roasting marshmallows. People split into small groups. The atmosphere became much more relaxed than the office. James stayed with the management team for almost an hour before quietly walking toward the water. I watched him leave. 5 minutes later, Emily nudged me. Go. What? He's alone. So, you've been looking over there for 10 minutes. I have not. She smiled. Samuel. I sighed. I'll be back. The lake was almost perfectly still. James stood near the dock with his hands in his pockets. You escaped. He smiled without turning around. So did you. I stepped beside him. Neither of us spoke immediately. The silence felt comfortable. I forgot how quiet places like this are, he finally said. You always liked lakes. You remember that? You wanted to become a fisherman for about 3 weeks. I caught one fish. It was tiny. It was still technically a fish. I laughed. You cried when we threw it back. I was emotional. You've always been emotional. He looked at me. I only cried because you named it. You shouldn't name fish. You named him George. I was 11. You were dramatic. So were you. We both laughed. The sound echoed softly across the water. After a while, James leaned against the railing. Can I ask you something? Sure. Were you angry? I already knew what he meant. For leaving? He nodded. For a long time. I figured. I told myself I wasn't. But you were. Yeah. He looked down at the lake. I deserve that. I wasn't angry because you moved. He looked back at me. I was angry because I thought you forgot me. His expression softened. I never did. I know that now. Another quiet settled between us. I wasted a lot of years. So did I? He shook his head. No. You built a life. So did you. I spent years wondering how you were doing. I did too. He laughed quietly. We're idiots. We really are. When we returned to the bonfire, several coworkers immediately looked up. Ryan grinned. There you are. James answered before I could. We were discussing tomorrow's schedule. Ryan nodded very slowly. By the lake. Correct. For 45 minutes. James didn't miss a beat. It required detail. Emily covered her mouth to hide a laugh. I sat down beside her. See? She whispered. What? He smiles. I looked toward James. She was right. He did. Not constantly. Not obviously. But around me. There was always something softer in his expression. Something familiar. I wasn't sure anyone else noticed. Except apparently Emily. Later that night, after everyone had gone back to their cabins, James and I found ourselves sitting on the porch. Neither of us seemed ready to sleep. The forest around us had gone completely quiet. I forgot how easy it is to talk to you, I said. He smiled. You've said that before. I know. It's still true. A cool breeze moved through the trees. James rested his arms on the porch railing. You know what scares me? What? Going back Monday. I frowned. Why? Because this. He gestured vaguely between us. Feels normal. It is normal. Not at work. I understood immediately. At the office we had to keep distance. Formal conversations. Professional boundaries. No long walks by the lake. No childhood stories. No easy laughter. It'll be okay. You think so? I do. He looked at me for several seconds. I always believed you. What? When you said things would work out. I smiled. I was usually guessing. You sounded convincing. We laughed quietly. Then, without warning, James became serious again. I'm really glad you're here. So am I. I don't mean to retreat. I know. For a moment, the world seemed impossibly still. Just the lake, the trees, the cool night air, and the two of us sitting side by side like no time had passed at all. Neither of us realized someone had stepped outside another cabin, or that from a distance. It looked very much like the department manager and one particular employee preferred spending every free moment together. And by the next morning, people were beginning to notice. By breakfast, the rumors had already started. Not loud enough for anyone to say them directly. Quiet enough that everyone noticed. I walked into the dining hall carrying a tray just as Ryan leaned toward Emily. The conversation stopped the second they saw me. Emily smiled a little too brightly. Morning. Morning. Ryan cleared his throat. So, I sighed. What? Nothing. Ryan. He held up both hands. I didn't say anything. Yet. He grinned. I was going to ask whether managers always go on midnight walks with employees. Emily kicked him under the table. Ow. What? He protested. It was just a question. I sat down. We couldn't sleep. So you walked around the lake? Yes. For almost an hour. Yes. Ryan nodded dramatically. Perfectly reasonable. Emily rolled her eyes. Ignore him. I'm trying. The conversation moved on, but I noticed something. Across the room, James was having almost the exact same experience. One of the senior managers said something. Everyone at that table laughed. James smiled politely. Then his eyes drifted toward me for just a second. He already knew. People had started talking. The morning schedule included outdoor team exercises. Thankfully, there were no trust falls. Ryan looked genuinely disappointed. I already prepared my speech about quitting. Instead, we were divided into mixed teams to solve a series of problem-solving challenges scattered around the property. The organizers read the team assignments. Emily ended up with finance. Ryan joined operations. I found myself grouped with 3 designers. And James led another team entirely. Probably intentional. The HR director was clearly making sure we weren't paired together. I wasn't complaining. It made everything simpler, at least until the final challenge. The last activity, the organizer announced, requires 2 volunteers from each team. Nobody moved. As expected, then Ryan pointed directly at me. Samuel. I glared at him. Before I could protest, someone from another team called James's name. The organizer smiled. Perfect. 5 minutes later, we discovered the exercise. 2 people had to navigate a simple obstacle course while giving directions to the rest of their team. Nothing difficult. Nothing physical. Mostly communication. James stood beside me as we waited for our turn. This is ironic. What is? We spent half our childhood building obstacle courses. I remember. You always cheated. I found efficient solutions. You ignored the rules. I improved the rules. He laughed. The sound escaped before he could stop it. A few people nearby turned toward us. Instantly, James became serious again. Manager mode. The change happened so quickly that it almost looked rehearsed. Our turn came. The challenge itself lasted less than 15 minutes. We finished first. Not because we were smarter than everyone else. Because we barely needed to explain anything. Left. Got it. Stop. Okay. Now forward. Without thinking, we anticipated each other's decisions. Years of childhood adventures apparently didn't disappear. When it ended, the organizer looked impressed. Have you 2 worked together before? James answered smoothly. We've known each other a long time. That was technically true. After lunch, everyone finally had free time. Some people rented kayaks. Others hiked nearby trails. Emily convinced half the office to play volleyball. I escaped to the small dock with a book I had no intention of reading. About 20 minutes later, footsteps approached. James. He held 2 bottles of water. I figured you'd hide here. You know me. I do. He sat at the edge of the dock, leaving enough space between us that anyone passing by wouldn't think twice. For a while, neither of us spoke. The lake rippled gently beneath us. I think we're being watched. I looked around carefully. No one right now. Not this second. He sighed. But people notice things. They do. I don't want anyone thinking you're getting special treatment. I know. He rubbed the back of his neck. I've been careful. You have. Maybe not careful enough. I understood exactly what he meant. Even if nothing inappropriate had happened. Appearances mattered. Especially when one person signed the other's performance reviews. I can back off. The words came quietly. James turned toward me. What? We don't have to keep meeting. His expression changed immediately. I didn't say that. I'm saying it. Why? Because your career matters. So does yours. Exactly. He looked frustrated for the first time all weekend. I finally get my best friend back. His voice softened. And now we're supposed to pretend we don't know each other? I don't like it either. This feels unfair. It is. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, James nodded slowly. We'll figure it out. You always say that. And usually you believe me. I smiled. I usually do. That evening, the company hosted a formal dinner. Nothing fancy. Just everyone gathered in the main lodge before heading home the next morning. The CEO gave a short speech, thanked everyone for their work, announced a few upcoming projects, then invited people to share stories from the retreat. Ryan volunteered immediately. Big mistake, Emily whispered. Ryan stood with complete confidence. I'd like to thank our fearless department manager. James looked mildly concerned. For proving that childhood friendships create unfair advantages during obstacle courses. Laughter spread across the room. James smiled politely. I'll remember that during your next performance review. Even louder laughter. Ryan grinned. Worth it. The joke passed. Or at least everyone acted like it had. But later, while people were getting dessert, Emily quietly joined me near the coffee station. Can I ask something? Sure. She looked unusually serious. You and James. I waited. Are you okay? The question surprised me. What do you mean? I mean, she lowered her voice. I've watched both of you all weekend. And you seem happy. I am. But also, she searched for the words. Careful. I looked into my coffee. We have to be. She nodded. I know. Then she smiled gently. I'm glad you found each other again. That simple sentence stayed with me. Found each other. It sounded better than reunited. Because that's what it felt like. Like we'd both been looking without realizing it. The retreat ended Saturday morning. Everyone loaded their luggage onto the buses. The drive back felt quieter than the trip out. Most people slept. Ryan somehow managed to snore loud enough for 3 people. Emily took a picture. For blackmail, she explained. Back at the office parking lot, everyone began saying goodbye before heading home for the weekend. James stood near the entrance thanking people as they left. When my turn came, he simply nodded. Have a good weekend, Samuel. You too. Professional. Exactly right. I walked toward my car. Halfway there, my phone vibrated. One new message. From James. Unknown number. Check your backpack when you get home. That was all. Nothing else. No explanation. No emoji. No signature. Curious. I waited until I reached my apartment. The backpack contained exactly what I'd packed. Laptop. Notebook. Water bottle. Then I noticed something tucked inside the front pocket. A folded piece of paper. I unfolded it carefully. Inside was a photocopy of an old photograph. 2 boys, about 12 years old, standing in front of a crooked treehouse. One was holding a basketball. The other was laughing at something outside the frame. On the back, written in slightly faded handwriting, were 5 simple words. Headquarters for life. James. I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I smiled. 10 years ago, I thought every reminder of our friendship had disappeared. It turned out James had been holding on to at least one. And without realizing it, I had just started holding on to new memories too. Monday morning felt strangely normal. Almost disappointingly normal. The retreat was already becoming another office story. Ryan complained about the bus ride. Emily was catching up on emails. Someone in accounting had somehow left an entire box of pastries in the break room. If I ignored the photograph sitting safely inside my desk drawer, everything looked exactly the same. James walked through the department at 9 sharp. Good morning. A chorus of greetings answered him. He stopped briefly beside my desk. Samuel. Morning. I'll need the first draft of the Parker campaign by Wednesday. You'll have it. Thank you. Then he continued down the aisle. Professional. Calm. Nothing unusual. Exactly as it should be. Around lunchtime, my phone buzzed. It wasn't James. It was my older sister, Claire. Claire, Mom's making dinner Sunday. You're coming. I smiled. She never asked. She announced. Me. I was planning to. Claire, good. Mom says she's inviting everyone. That usually meant cousins, neighbors, anyone who happened to walk past the house. 5 minutes later, another message appeared. Claire, you bringing anyone? I stared at the screen. Me, no. Claire, still impossible to date? Me, still impossible. Claire, you're too picky. I laughed quietly. Emily looked over the divider. What? My sister. That explains the expression. What expression? The one that says you've already lost the argument. That's exactly what happened. Wednesday afternoon, James called me into his office. I carried my laptop with the completed campaign. He closed the door after I entered. Let's take a look. For 20 minutes, we discussed nothing except work. Color palettes. Client expectations. Presentation flow. Ideas. He challenged a few of my choices. I defended them. Eventually, he nodded. I like your reasoning. I was hoping you would. You've become confident. I've had good managers. A small smile appeared. I'll pretend that wasn't aimed at me. It wasn't. It absolutely was. The meeting ended. I stood to leave. Just as my hand reached the doorknob, James spoke again. My parents asked about you. I turned back. They did. They still remember you. That surprised me. Your mom used to make those enormous pancakes. I laughed. She still does. My dad still talks about the treehouse. That surprised me even more. I thought. I stopped. What? I thought he hated it. James smiled. He hated repairing it. That's different. He says building it with us was worth every splinter. I looked down for a second. It's strange. What is? Hearing that. He nodded. I know. There was another brief silence. My mom wants to invite you over sometime. I looked at him. Seriously? She'd probably cry. I laughed. She cried when we got our first apartment in Seattle. That sounds about right. I haven't told her we reconnected yet. Why not? I wanted to make sure. He searched for the right words. That you weren't going to disappear again. I felt something tighten in my chest. I'm not planning to. Good. Neither are you. He smiled. No. Sunday arrived. Mom's house looked exactly the way it always had. Too many flowers. Too many cars parked outside. Too much food. Claire opened the door before I even knocked. There he is. She hugged me. You look tired. I work. You need a vacation. I literally just came back from one. Work retreats don't count. Fair enough. Inside, the familiar chaos had already begun. Kids ran through the hallway. Someone was arguing about football in the living room. Mom appeared from the kitchen carrying a bowl. There you are. She hugged me tightly. Sit down. I just got here. You look thin. I saw you last week. You still look thin. Some things never changed. Dinner lasted almost 2 hours. Halfway through dessert, Claire casually asked. So, I immediately became suspicious. So, anyone interesting at work? Mom looked up. I was wondering the same thing. There isn't anyone. Claire narrowed her eyes. Really? Really? You smiled before answering. I always smile. No, you don't. I sighed. There is a new manager. Mom nodded. Oh, he. I hesitated. What? He turned out to be someone we knew. Who? I looked between them. James. Silence. Complete silence. Mom slowly lowered her fork. James Carter. Yeah. Her hand covered her mouth. No. I laughed. Yes. Claire's eyes widened. You're James. I don't think I ever owned him. You know what I mean. Mom actually looked emotional. After all these years? I nodded. He works with you now? He's my manager. Claire blinked. That's either wonderful or a complete disaster. We're still figuring that out. Mom reached across the table and touched my hand. I always hoped you'd find each other again. You did. Of course. I thought everyone forgot. She looked genuinely surprised. Samuel, you boys were inseparable. I know. When he moved away, she sighed. You were never quite the same. I hadn't expected to hear that. I was fine. You were quieter. Claire nodded. You were. I survived. Mom smiled gently. That's different. That evening, after I returned home, I found myself thinking about her words. You were never quite the same. Had it really been that obvious? Had everyone seen something I hadn't? My phone rang. James. Hey. How was family dinner? How did you know it was today? You told me. I did. 3 weeks ago. I laughed. You remember everything. Not everything. Most things. So, I leaned back on the couch. I told them about you. There was a pause. You did. Mom almost cried. He laughed softly. That sounds familiar. Apparently, she always hoped we'd reconnect. My mom, too. Another quiet settled between us. Then James cleared his throat. I have a question. Okay. My parents are visiting next weekend. I waited. They asked if you'd come to dinner. I blinked. They already know? I told them after the retreat. And my mom cried. I laughed. Seriously? I'm beginning to think our mothers should start a support group. I'd pay to watch that. He laughed too. So, he sounded unexpectedly nervous. Would you come? I looked out my apartment window. A few months ago, I would have said no without thinking. Now, I'd like that. His relief was obvious even through the phone. Good. After we hung up, I sat quietly for a long time. Meeting James again had already changed my life more than I wanted to admit. But meeting the people who had once felt like my second family, that somehow felt even bigger. I just hoped seeing them again would bring back happy memories. I had no idea that one unexpected conversation at James's parents' house would change the way I looked at our entire friendship forever. The following Friday, I stood outside James's parents' house with my hands in my pockets, wondering why I suddenly felt more nervous than I had before my first job interview. I'd known this house once. Every crack in the driveway, every loose step on the porch, every window where James and I had waved to each other before school. 10 years later, everything looked smaller. Except the memories. The front door opened before I had a chance to knock. Samuel. James's mother didn't hesitate for a second. She wrapped me in a warm hug. Oh, look at you. I laughed. It's good to see you too. You got taller. I was already taller than James. She smiled. That's still true. Behind her, James leaned against the hallway wall, shaking his head. I don't know why everyone keeps mentioning that. Because it bothers you, I answered. It absolutely does. His father appeared from the living room. For a moment, he simply stared at me. Then he smiled. Welcome home. Home. One word. But somehow it hit harder than anything else that evening. Dinner felt surprisingly normal. Stories flowed easily. James's mother brought up old neighborhood memories. His father talked about rebuilding the treehouse 3 different times because 2 boys apparently believed nails lasted forever. James laughed. We were ambitious. You were destructive. We were creative. You nearly set the garden shed on fire. That happened once. It happened twice. I nearly choked on my drink. I forgot about that. You conveniently forgot, his father said. We remembered. The room filled with laughter. For the first time in years, I felt like I had stepped backward into a life that had simply paused instead of ending. Then James's mother stood up. I almost forgot. She disappeared upstairs. A minute later, she returned carrying an old plastic storage box. The kind every family keeps somewhere. Photographs, birthday cards, old school papers. I found these while cleaning. She placed it on the table. I thought you boys might like them. James looked at me. Ready? Probably not. We spent almost an hour opening old photo albums. There we were at 8 years old with scraped knees. At 10, proudly holding a trophy from a neighborhood basketball tournament. At 13, covered in paint after trying to renovate the treehouse ourselves. Every picture brought another memory, another story, another reminder of everything we'd lost. Then James's mother quietly handed me a small envelope. This one's yours. I frowned. My name's on it. Written across the front in messy teenage handwriting were the words, "For Sam." My heart stopped. I slowly looked at James. What is this? His expression changed immediately. He frowned. I thought Dad threw all of them away. So did I. His mother looked confused. What letters? James carefully took the envelope. His face went pale. I wrote this the night before we moved. My hands suddenly felt cold. You never sent it? I did. His father looked genuinely surprised. I mailed 3. James stared at him. No. I gave them to you. The room became completely silent. His father's expression slowly changed. Then, recognition. Oh. He sat back heavily. Oh God. Nobody spoke. He rubbed his forehead. I remember. James's voice barely came out. You remember? His father closed his eyes. I found the letters in my briefcase after we arrived. You told me you mailed them. I meant to. Silence. I was overwhelmed. New job. New city. I put them in a drawer. I forgot. James stared at him as if he had stopped understanding English. You forgot. His father looked absolutely devastated. When I found them months later, his voice cracked. I thought it was too late. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. 10 years. 10 years of believing someone had chosen to leave. Because of 3 forgotten letters. James slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a folded sheet of notebook paper. He handed it to me without saying anything. I unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was uneven, rushed. The words blurred almost immediately because I couldn't stop staring at the first sentence. Sam, I'm scared. I don't want to leave. Please don't think I'm choosing this. I'll find you somehow, even if it takes years. You're still my best friend. I couldn't breathe. I kept reading. He'd written about Seattle. About promising we'd build another treehouse one day. About believing we'd still be friends when we were old. At the bottom, don't forget me. I could never forget you. The room disappeared. For 10 years. I believed he never cared enough to say goodbye. And all this time, the goodbye had existed. It had simply never reached me. James quietly looked at his father. I spent half my life thinking Samuel hated me. His father couldn't meet his eyes. I know. Samuel. Not Sam. Not the nickname. My full name. Like he needed every word to stay steady. I thought. James swallowed. I thought I wasn't worth one letter. His father's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. I know. No. His father shook his head. You don't. I stole 10 years from both of you. Nobody answered. Because there wasn't anything to say. How do you respond to losing a decade? Later that evening, after dinner ended, James and I stepped outside. The sun had already disappeared. The old neighborhood looked almost exactly the same. Without saying a word, we started walking. Eventually, we reached the empty lot where the treehouse had once stood. Only the tree remained. Older, wider, still standing. James looked up into its branches. I used to dream about this place. So did I. I always imagined we'd meet here again. I laughed quietly. That sounds impossible. It does. We stood there for a long time. Neither of us needed to speak. Finally, James broke the silence. You know what's strange? What? If we'd met again anywhere else? He looked at me. I don't think we'd have become friends this quickly. You don't. He shook his head. We're different people now. We are. But every time I talk to you, he smiled faintly. It feels like the 10 years disappear. I knew exactly what he meant. Because I felt it too. I've been thinking about something. What? If you weren't my manager. I looked at him. Things would probably be much simpler. My heart started beating faster. What do you mean? He let out a slow breath. I mean, he searched for the words. I don't know where this is going anymore. Neither did I. And that was the frightening part. A few weeks ago, I thought I'd simply gotten my childhood best friend back. Now, I wasn't sure that was the whole truth anymore. I looked at James. He looked back at me. Neither of us looked away. For the first time since we'd met again, the silence between us no longer felt like friendship alone. And somehow, that realization was far more terrifying than losing him had ever been. Monday changed everything. Not because anything happened, because nothing did. James walked into the office exactly at 9. Good morning, everyone. People answered. Meetings started. Emails piled up. Clients called. It was just another workday. But after what had happened at his parents' house, after reading the letter, after standing beneath the old tree, pretending everything was exactly the same suddenly felt impossible. I caught myself looking toward his office more often than I should. Every time, he was working, focused, professional. Every now and then our eyes met. Neither of us smiled. Neither of us looked away immediately. It was enough. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of pretending. 3 weeks of conversations that ended with, "See you tomorrow, Samuel." 3 weeks of dinners where we carefully avoided saying the one thing both of us knew was waiting. Then Friday afternoon, James asked me to step into his office. I closed the door behind me. You wanted to see me? He nodded. I have news. Something in his expression immediately made me nervous. What happened? I resigned. For a second, I genuinely thought I'd misheard him. What? My last day is next Friday. I stared at him. You resigned? Yes. Why? A small smile appeared. I accepted another position. Where? Seattle. The room suddenly felt much quieter. I wasn't looking. He continued before I could speak. They contacted me. When? A month ago. The week after the retreat. And you never told me? I couldn't. You could have. I wanted to be sure first. I leaned against the chair. So that's it. I'm leaving. The words hurt far more than they should have. Again. He was leaving again. James looked at me for a long moment. I promised myself something after we found those letters. What? I would never disappear from your life again. Silence. So this isn't goodbye. It feels like it. No. He slowly stood. This time, he smiled faintly. I'm asking you to decide what happens next. The office organized a farewell party the following Friday. There was cake, too much coffee, a speech from the CEO. Everyone thanked James for modernizing the department. Emily hugged him. Ryan shook his hand. You were a terrifying boss. I'll take that as a compliment. You should. Everyone laughed. Eventually, people started leaving, one by one, until only James and I remained in the office. The lights in most departments had already been switched off. His office was almost empty. The framed photos were gone. The shelves were bare. Only one cardboard box remained. So, I tried to smile. So, I guess this is it. James looked at me. No. He opened the box, reached inside, pulled out something wrapped in brown paper. I made this for you. I carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a wooden sign. Old wood, freshly restored. The faded blue paint was still visible beneath the varnish. Across the front were carved words. Headquarters for life. I looked up so quickly I almost dropped it. No way. I found it. Where? The original treehouse. You kept this. I rebuilt it. You? I couldn't even finish the sentence. The old sign had fallen behind the roots. He smiled. I spent 2 weekends restoring it. I ran my fingers gently across the letters. This belongs to both of us. I know. Neither of us spoke. Then James quietly said, I have one more question. I looked at him. When I leave here, he took a slow breath. What do you want us to be? There it was. The question we'd both been avoiding. Friends. Best friends. Something more. Every possible answer could change everything. I laughed softly. You know? What? When we were kids, you never answered serious questions quickly. I still don't. He smiled. I noticed. I stepped closer. Not enough to touch him. Just enough that neither of us had to raise our voices. I spent 10 years thinking I missed my best friend. He stayed completely still. But after these last few months, I shook my head. I realized that wasn't the whole truth. His eyes never left mine. I kept wondering why it felt different. I smiled. Now I know. He whispered. So do I. There was one long moment where neither of us spoke. The silence itself became the answer. Finally, James asked, "Can I say something completely reckless?" "You probably will anyway." I've been trying to convince myself that what I feel is only nostalgia. I laughed quietly. How's that going? It failed. Mine too. For the first time since we'd met again, there was nothing left to hide. No company policies. No manager. No employee. Just Samuel. And James. I don't know what happens next, I admitted. Neither do I. But I'd like to find out. His smile was brighter than I'd seen since we were teenagers. I was hoping you'd say that. 6 months later, I stood in Seattle holding 2 cups of coffee. James was late. Some things never changed. He jogged across the street with an apologetic grin. I got stuck in traffic. You live 4 blocks away. I know. That's impressive. I've always been talented. You've always been dramatic. He laughed. I missed hearing that. You hear it every day. I know. And I never get tired of it. We walked through the park together. No rush. No deadlines. No pretending. Just 2 people who had finally stopped losing time. Before we reached the overlook, James stopped. What? He pointed toward a small community center. Children were building a wooden treehouse with volunteers. I stared at it, then looked at him. He smiled. We should help. I laughed. We're absolutely going to make the same mistakes. Probably. We'll build it crooked. Definitely. And someone will complain. They always do. We looked at each other and laughed the same way we had when we were 12. Some people say you can never get your childhood back. They're right. You can't. But sometimes, if you're incredibly lucky, life gives you something even better. A second chance. Not to become who you were, but to become who you were always meant to be. And this time, neither of us was ever going to let the other disappear again.